Hi, my name is Alexis Kallio, and I'm Deputy Director of Research here at the Queensland Conservatorium in Melbourne in Brisbane. And I'm very, very pleased to be joined here by Andrea Rodríguez Sánchez from Colombia and Gillian Howell from NAM. Welcome.
Thank you,
Alexis. And we thought, we've been spending 3 wonderful days at the Social Impact of Music Making Conference or Symposium, speaking about music and cultural and social policy and changing the world and all those kinds of difficult and wonderful things, and thought that we'd share just a few of our thoughts online together. First, I would just like to acknowledge that where we are here, we're meeting on, or Andrea and I are meeting on the lands of the Yagara and Turrbal people. And I'll extend our respects to elders past and present, and to any First Nations folks who might be joining us online. Gillian, would you like to tell us whereabouts you are?
Yes, thank you. I'd like to acknowledge I'm living and working and joining the meeting today from the lands of the Wurundjeri people in the Woiwurrung language group in NAM, which is also known as Melbourne. And I'm a Senior Research Fellow at the University of Melbourne in the Faculty of Fine Arts and Music.
So maybe we can begin with Andrea telling us a little bit about your work in Colombia as a music and peace building researcher.
Yeah, I live in Colombia. I live in a small town called Sincelejo, and I am part of a social work program. There are a university called CECAR, Caribbean University. My field work is peace building and music since 10 years ago, more than this. Yes, I try to put together my passions, music and to work with the people. Yeah.
So we were speaking a little bit earlier about a cultural policy. It's a cultural policy or social policy in Colombia where music has been quite central and instrumental in social cohesion and bringing people together after many, many decades of conflict. Could you tell us a little bit about that to kick us off?
Maybe 20 years ago started a big policy in Colombia called Music Social Cohesion, more or less, national program for social cohesion, coexistence. Start to work with the people in the communities, but not create the spaces. The people in Colombia be together and sing together and dance together always. And in fact, in the middle of the conflict, the people use the music and use the dance and the art to healing the situations, the impacts of the conflict. So the public policy started in 2003 and reinforce or be strong this kind of groups or expressions. Yeah.
And Gillian, this intersects with your work as well. But I'm interested, especially in contemporary Australia, what you see as the relevance of a cultural policy in a context with maybe such explicit violence, where there is a very articulated need for that social healing and individual healing as well, and the role that music can play in that. I wonder what you see as the relevance in where we are here in Australia.
Yeah, I mean, I guess our conflicts and our violences are perhaps less visible, more hidden. But Andre was sharing earlier that Johan Galtung's triangle of different forms of violence, and while direct violence, armed conflict, as happened in Colombia, is very visible. There are also structural forms of violence and cultural forms of violence that really both limit people's opportunities to live full and flourishing lives, and have intergenerational impacts in the way that they can be internalized and then also perpetuated or reproduced in different ways in people's lives through family environments, school environments, workplace environments, and the ways that the policies that shape our daily lives are enacted without paying attention to some of these injustices and inequalities. And I think that of the work that we see the National Music Plan for Coexistence wanting to do in Colombia has a lot of resonance here in terms of the roles that people are already using music for in their lives, to connect, to create bonds, to understand each other better, to understand something of people who are unfamiliar, of cultures that are unfamiliar, and to kind of also make space for all of those cultures. These are practices that people already engage with and are part of the reasons why music exists in human culture, I believe. But they're not necessarily enshrined in the way that arts and culture are supported in our policy space, and that, or how they're supported in our education policy, and the reasons why and how arts are delivered in learning environments as well. So I think there are many resonances, but not necessarily the same sort of level of recognition, of formal recognition that allows for a more systematic approach to happen here.
I think you're right. I think that in Australia, a lot of, like Gillian says, there's a lot of music making and cultural coming together with communities happening, but it's very much reliant on individual drive to make that happen or to support that, rather than that systems level structural supports or frameworks as you have in Colombia. And I think that it's a really interesting time in Australia at the moment, because we do have a new cultural policy called Revive, and something that's quite interesting in that is that it's speaking about all kinds of arts and musics and cultures for people. So it's kind of a revaluation or a recalibration, I guess, from looking to enhance access only to what have been perceived as quite elitist art forms, sort of expanding people's access to be able to engage with those, to a recognition and a valuing of those more everyday, those more personal or local cultural expressions and ways of being together. And I wonder if you could just talk to us a little bit about what that looks like in this sort of systems level support for those local music cultures in Colombia, because I think it's particularly timely for us.
Yeah, I agree with you that it's different when the people decide to create these spaces for the community or for a group, when a public policy decides to support an idea of society, support a direction, or promote some kind of relationships. In the case of Colombia, I think so. The community music has been important during a long time, but now with the public policy, the people has not just a support related to the budget, has an intention related to what we are looking for in the spaces. In this sense, the spaces are connected with the main goal to be together and to play the music related to enjoy, but related to create these sharing spaces and a space for recognition, mutual recognition, and not just in the small group. Is with other groups in Colombia, other people, other cultures in Colombia. We were talking about how the program decide to record and to transcribe or to have scores,
documentation,
documentation of the different expressions, and sharing these expressions with other people in different parts of the country. So it's start to know other people in a different way. Maybe they don't be together in the same place, but you are singing their music, you are playing their music, and start to open your mind and your heart.
It's a humanizing experience. And I think that
we also as you were speaking, I was thinking that, you know, one of the other really interesting things about the policy space here is that the arts sit in, it's quite siloed. So these sorts of more social goals aren't necessarily sitting within an arts or a cultural policy space, or if they are, they're there sort of as afterthoughts or as secondary goals. There's some really interesting analysis in a book that some of your students might be interested in, Alexis, by Gay Hawkins, called From Nimbin to Mardi Gras, which is sort of traces the space for community arts in Australia through the 19 sort of post-war era up until the early 90s, because it was published in the early 90s. And just sort of, and looking at those early, the forefathers, if you like, of the Australia Council, or now Creative Australia, and their interest in reinforcing and supporting a very European model for arts funding, that the national policies or funding policies around supporting arts and culture were very much about maintaining and ensuring that there was a strong representation of the European Western art music heritage being perpetuated, being supported here in Australia, and everything else sort of, they didn't kind of have a clear policy space even in the arts funding model. So we have a long history of that, not quite engaging with those more social intersections of arts and social life.
And I think you see that across policy portfolios as well, and not necessarily always in good ways. And I'm thinking particularly of maybe what might be the absolute opposite of that sort of elitist Western art music ideal that has been supported by funders and governments for so long. There's a wonderful drill rap group called 1-4 based in Western Sydney, and they are extremely heavily policed because their music is associated with violence. Now, there is absolutely no evidence to suggest that listening to that music incites violence or causes violence or turns kids bad or any of this kind of thing. But there is this very sharp divide on what we think is musically good and what we think is socially or culturally good. And I think that that's, for me as a researcher and as a teacher, working with so many diverse groups and musics and cultures is something so interesting, in that there is, you know, music gives that opportunity to listen to each other and learn about each other and have that humanizing kind of relationship. But then so quickly, through policy and through sort of social control measures, it can equally be cut off with these kinds of very sort of abrupt assumptions without really checking them out first and understanding the whole pictures of how music is empowering, of how music does connect with culture and how music does connect with community. And all of those good things, it's seen as, sometimes all of those good things are recognized as other and therefore scary or a threat as well, rather than unpacking it with a little bit more nuance, I suppose. And I suppose you see that a lot with the sort of conflicts as well that Colombia has lived through.
Yeah, I asked yesterday some a friend from the Ministry of Culture. What do you think that is the main achievement of this policy? She told me that the people in Colombia now enjoy all our musical rhythms, our culture, and the identity is a multicultural identity, and the people feel proud of this kind of identity. Maybe not all people in Colombia, not all citizenships, but most of them. So
does that extend also to popular music kinds of, or is it sort of just the traditional musics that are around, or is it really all musical cultures? And
no, it's related to traditional music.
Musics.
Yeah. And I told this because you told about the bad music, good music, but culture, good culture, and we had this discussion very strong 20 years ago, when the policy, public policy started. Was a strong discussion, or a strong tension between the people, and today, in the universities, the people study the traditional music. And they invite, in the universities, they invite the musicians, the traditional musicians, to explain the music and to teach to the students our own music. So I think so. The policy create two good things. The first one is this healing of the violence together, playing music, and the music is memory for us. It's memory. We sing about the conflict, and the lyrics are related sometimes about this, and it's a form to healing the situation. But at the same time, the policy create an empowered people. Yeah, they now they believe that the own music is good, and is yeah, have a dignity now inside. I don't know.
And recognize others' music.
Yeah.
It's at once very different, but there's so much that resonates in terms of overcoming those stigmas and boundaries that are sometimes so hard between groups, whatever kind of music, and how to build bridges or somehow break those boundaries, make them a little bit more malleable.
Yeah, so I want to say something more, and maybe it's strategical when a political system decide to reinforce, for example, festivals or record songs and put in the radio or something like this, because I don't know if say the different citizenships start to listen different music, start to feel comfortable with different kind of festivals. Now is very, very, very common that the people go to different parts of Colombia to be or to enjoy the different festivals of our music. And what's with the time?
Yeah.
2 decades. The people start to understand and was in the environment. The environment was changing. Yeah.
The power of a culture.
Just, I mean, this is, I'm interested about something in the Colombian context, and then also how it might map onto the Australian context. And I'm particularly in relation to the armed conflict and the reintegration of combatants as part of this work of national coexistence and cohesion. You know, there were decades of armed conflict. People were displaced multiple times in some parts of the country. The violence and the different ways that it was perpetuated were so considerable. So people who had combatant roles, you know, that first of all, there's that re-identification of themselves as non-combatants, you know, that the combatant identity is no longer so relevant, but also for them to be re-accepted into communities where there have been harms caused. Has there been, in this national music policy around coexistence, have the combatants as a particularly you know, potentially difficult group to reintegrate, have you seen interesting things emerging there, or interesting systematization of their reintegration into society through music?
Wow.
Is that taking it? Are we going off into way too big a different direction there?
No.
It's a great question.
Yeah. No, really the program is just for citizenships.
Okay.
But the program have some budgets for creation, for research festivals, and all people, all citizenships include the ex-combatants can apply. So it's not specifically, it's not for them, but they can be involved in different options, in the, for example, in the diplomas or course, they can do and they can involve. But you are right. We need to think about this. Yeah.
I think it's a great question that, you know, can be asked of. I mean, that's quite a highlighted difficult situation to figure out how you navigate, but it's not a unique situation to navigate in that sense. And I think that one thing that's, I think, useful to remember is that there's not easy differentiation between those who inflict harm and those who are harmed. It's quite often a system of harm and of violence that, you know, is on everybody, and everybody is traumatized through those. And so I think that the arts and culture and music and education and all of these dimensions of our work can have a really profound way of coming together in a way that is actually maybe feels, I don't know if it actually is, but it feels somewhat safer for people to make music together before maybe speaking, or before, because it is an innate human experience, and it's something to, you know, learn each other's rhythms or to be in rhythm with each other when you have never seen eye to eye with somebody. I don't think we should underestimate that, which is sometimes, you know, it can be a very mundane moment, but a very transformative one for people in many kinds of conflicting situations.
Yeah, but yeah, it's a fabulous conversation. Yeah, two things. Maybe the first one, because the policy is centered in the citizenships, maybe it's because the 81% of the victims of the armed conflict has been civilians. The second point is that we are trying with the programs and with the peace building work, trying to to create or to insist in an alternative way related to the violence. Yeah, because we talk about the internalized violence. We need to deal with this and don't reproduce, but in the other way, the context is a complex context. The war is there, is active. Yes. This agreement started in 2016, but we have a lot of mafias reactive, and some people, ex-combatants, didn't agree. So we need to create this alternative and related to the violence, no? Insist that the peaceful identity, and try to reinforce the proposal, the peaceful proposal in the communities. But the people know the communities are very, very brave and are doing a hard work in a psychosocial way, creating a lot of options. But I think the policy need to take a decision to support the people in this way.
And I think it's, you know, all of this sort of discussion that we're having can sound really idealistic. And of course, I think that, you know, music isn't an easy answer. Music in itself isn't always easy. But I think what I'm hearing from you, Andrea, is that it's also a whole of society investment. It's probably the wrong word, but it's that just because it's just music or just art doesn't exclude us from those responsibilities or those social and cultural responsibilities to peace, to coexistence and social cohesion and social betterment, whatever that might be. That I think quite often, maybe especially in Australia, the arts have been seen as an optional luxury, rather than just part of life. And if you think of it as part of life, then we share those responsibilities as a health department might have, or as an education department, or a Department of the Interior, or any of these kinds of portfolios. I think that is a whole of society and a whole of government responsibility and effort.
Yeah, and that music or the arts, they're a pathway towards something better. They're not necessarily going to be able to do all the heavy lifting on their own. They do require that investment and that sense of shared responsibility among the citizenry, as well as among the elected representatives, to sort of carry forward that vision of a better future, a more equal future, a more just future.
And as Andrea says, that local drive is actually essential. It can't be a government implemented top-down thing. It has to be a letting go of that centralized.
I thought this is an important point of this policy. Alejandro Mantilla, important person for this. Alejandro, I don't know, is anthropologist or sociologist, a musician. That he was the person who opened the Ministry of Culture to create dialogues, conversations with the communities, and create a policy together. I think
right.
this was
like through a public consultation process.
Yeah.
or something like that.
This, I think, was the, I don't know, the point that part or divide the policy, the public policy culture or public policy in Colombia into parts.
Yeah.
And was a person, was Alejandro and the team.
And that space for meaningful engagement with
Yeah.
everyday people.
Yeah, and because you're right, we had this kind of policies in Colombia, more centered and top down, but this kind of policies has other way. And I think for this reason the policy is like this, in other perspective, on without this, I think maybe we didn't have these multicultural expressions inside and different ways, and the universities, the communities, the citizenships are involved. Leaders are involved.
And I think that might be a good call to see what we all do with our new cultural policy revive.
Yes.
To see how we might localize that and what kinds of discussions that might begin for us. And we will be maybe looking over your way for some guidance. Thank you very much.
Indeed.
Gillian and Andrea, it's been an absolute pleasure as always. And a discussion I think will be continuing.
Yeah, thank you, Andrea. So pleased that you were able to come across the Pacific and land in our land, and so that we could have these conversations in person, and it's just been such a rich, wonderful time to have you here. So really pleased to see you in person. Let's bring it back. Thanks a lot, Alexis.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.